I never loved him. Let's start there with the cold, hard pebble of truth I've carried in my chest for 3 years. What I loved was the idea of him, the idea he represented, stability, a fortress of old money and quiet power, a vault with a human face. His name was Alistair Finch, and he was 28 years my senior, a man carved from gray tweed and stock reports, with eyes the color of a winter sea and a smile that never quite reached them. He didn't court me, he acquired me, much like he acquired his rare first editions or his stake in the Baltic shipping firm. I was a decorative, well-spoken accessory for his Mayfair townhouse, a young wife to silence the whispers about his eternal bachelorhood. And I saw my chance. The prize was not his heart, which I suspected beat with the steady, unromantic rhythm of a Swiss clock, but his fortune. A fortune so vast and labyrinthine, I imagined I could siphon off a river and he'd never notice it was gone. It began with the household accounts, a modest skimming, a form of practice. I'd inflate the invoice from the florist, the interior designer, the caterer for one of his interminably dull dinner parties. A few hundred here, a few thousand there. The money trickled into an account I'd opened under my maiden name, Lorna Shaw, in a different bank. It felt like a game, a clever test of the system. Alistair would glance at the summaries prepared by his ancient, bespectacled accountant, Mr. Thistlewood, give a curt nod, and move on. His trust wasn't in me, but in his own impeccable systems. That was his first mistake. His second was underestimating the quiet, observant girl he'd installed in his gilded cage. For 2 years, I played my part perfectly. The dutiful, slightly vapid wife, interested in gallery openings and charity luncheons, politely baffled by his talk of mergers and acquisitions. I learned his rhythms. Every Tuesday and Thursday evening, he was sequestered in his study from 7 to 9, engaged in transatlantic calls. His personal laptop, a sleek silver thing, never left that study. But his tablet, which he used for reading the Financial Times in the drawing room after dinner, was often left carelessly on the chaise longue. It was password protected, of course. But Alistair, for all his financial genius, was a creature of habit. I'd watched his long, elegant fingers tap in the code countless times as I pretended to be engrossed in a novel. The date of the founding of his first company, 1987. One Thursday, after he'd retired to his study, the tablet glowed on the cushion like a beacon. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird in a silk cage. I picked it up. The screen lit up, demanding the password. I entered 1987. It unlocked with a soft chime. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I was in. I didn't dare do anything that night. I simply browsed, my fingers trembling. I found his portfolio summaries, his banking dashboards, his investment logs. The numbers were astronomical. They represented not just money, but a lifetime of ruthless, focused accumulation. And to him, they were just numbers. To me, they were freedom. A life somewhere warm and far away under a different name where Lorna Finch could disappear and someone new could be born. My plan was slow, meticulous. I wouldn't make a grand heist. That was for movies. I would initiate a series of tiny, imperceptible leaks. Using his tablet during my windows of opportunity, I began to research. I found a digital bank in the Caymans that offered discreet wealth management services. I used a VPN, created an email alias. I identified a few of his smaller, dormant holdings, a minor stake in a New Zealand forestry fund, a bundle of low-yield municipal bonds. They were the financial equivalent of dust gathering on a high shelf. I began the painstaking process of forging authorizations. I studied his digital signature, the specific formal language he used in emails to his brokers. I practiced for weeks on blank documents. The first transfer was for £50,000, a test. I initiated it from his tablet, routing it through a convoluted chain of intermediary accounts I'd painstakingly set up, before it finally landed in my Cayman Islands haven. The authorization request would go to his email, which I couldn't access, but I knew he received hundreds of automated alerts. My gamble was that this one, from a fund he rarely thought about, would be lost in the noise, especially if it was framed as a routine rebalancing or fee. For 3 days, I lived in a state of suspended animation. Every ring of the house phone, every ping from his study made me jump. I watched his face over dinner, searching for a flicker of suspicion. He discussed the volatility of the semiconductor market. He complimented the Sol Munier. He was exactly as he always was, detached, polite, impersonal. The transfer cleared. The money was mine. A wild, giddy triumph surged through me. I'd done it. I'd cracked the vault. Emboldened, I grew greedier. 100,000 pounds, 200,000 pounds. I created a fictional financial advisor, M. Alderton, and began generating fake performance reports for the drained funds, which I would leave subtly visible on the tablet for Alistair to see, should he ever check. I was writing a novel within his financial reality. The money in my offshore accounts swelled. I started to dream in color. A villa in Sicily, a new identity, a life where I wasn't a piece of furniture in Alistair Finch's museum. But I grew careless. Confidence is a poison. I began using the tablet more frequently, for longer periods. I started a transfer for 500,000 pounds, my largest yet. It was to be my final score before I began planning my disappearance. As I worked, I heard a floorboard creak in the hall outside the drawing room. I froze, my blood turning to ice. It was only Mrs. Henderson, the housekeeper, doing her rounds. But the scare rattled me. I rushed to finish, making a single, small error. In my haste to mimic his language, I misspelled authorization in the transfer document. I wrote authorization, the American spelling. Alistair, a pedant of the highest order, who once corrected a waiter on the pronunciation of Bordeaux, would never make that mistake. I didn't notice. I sent the request and closed the tablet, my heart still racing from the scare. 2 nights later, everything changed. Dinner was as silent as usual, the only sound the precise click of silver on fine china. As we finished our coffee, Alistair did not stand to retreat to his study. Instead, he dabbed his lips with a linen napkin and fixed those winter sea eyes on me. "Lorna, let's take a brandy in the study tonight. There's something I'd like to discuss." His voice was neutral, but the request was unprecedented. Dread, cold and heavy, pooled in my stomach. I followed him, the taste of coffee turning to ash in my mouth. His study was a temple to his success. Dark wood, leather, walls lined with books that looked red. He didn't sit behind his vast desk. He stood by the fireplace, swirling amber liquid in a crystal snifter. "Please sit," he said, gesturing to the Chesterfield sofa. I perched on the edge, my spine rigid. He remained standing, looking down at me. The silence stretched, becoming a physical thing in the room. "Mr. Thistlewood brought some anomalies to my attention today," he began, his tone conversational, as if discussing the weather. "Small things, really. A misspelling here, an unusual routing instruction there. In funds I haven't looked at in years." He took a slow sip of brandy. "Curious, wouldn't you say?" I couldn't speak. My throat had sealed shut. I had a forensic audit run on those accounts. The digital trail was quite clever, layered, almost professional. He set his glass down on the mantelpiece with a soft, definitive click. But it led, inevitably, back to this house, and to a series of logins from my personal tablet during times when I was invariably on a call. He finally turned his full gaze on me. It wasn't angry, it was interested. Coldly, analytically interested. The American spelling of authorization was a particularly nice touch. A Freudian slip, perhaps? A subconscious yearning for a fresh start across the Atlantic? Every lie, every careful construction crumbled to dust inside me. He knew. He had known, perhaps for days, watching me, letting me continue, gathering his evidence. The game was over, and I had lost spectacularly. "Alistair, My voice was a dry whisper. "How much, Lorna?" he interrupted, his voice still terrifyingly calm. "What was the price tag on your performance as my wife?" The humiliation was total. He stripped me bare, not with shouts, but with quiet, precise facts. He named every transfer, every intermediary account, the exact balance in the Cayman Islands. He knew it all. The total, as of this afternoon, is £1.2 million, he said, answering his own question. A modest sum in the grand scheme, but theft nonetheless. Tears of shame and terror finally spilled over. "I'm sorry," I choked out. The words were pathetic, meaningless. "Sorry?" He almost smiled, a thin, humorless stretching of his lips. "No, you're not sorry you did it. You're sorry you were caught. You never loved me. You wanted access. I was always aware of that probability. I considered it a manageable risk, a cost of doing business, as it were. What I did not anticipate was the mediocrity of your ambition." "Petty theft, Lorna? You had the run of the house, my name, my network. With a fraction of the cunning you've displayed, you could have negotiated a generous allowance, invested it, built your own capital. But you chose to be a common thief." Each word was a lash. He wasn't heartbroken. He was disappointed, as if a piece of his otherwise flawless collection had proven to be a forgery. "What are you going to do?" I asked, the question hanging in the air between us. "The options are clear," he said, picking up his brandy again. "Option 1, I call the police. The evidence is irrefutable. Embezzlement, fraud, forgery. You would be convicted. You would spend several years in a place decidedly less comfortable than this. Your name, and by unfortunate association mine, would be dragged through the press, a messy, vulgar business." I stared at him, paralyzed. "Option 2, he continued, as if outlining a merger. You sign the documents currently sitting on my desk, a full confession detailing your actions. You willingly forfeit every penny you took. The funds will be returned immediately. You also sign a postnuptial agreement, relinquishing any and all future claims on my estate in exchange for a one-time, lump sum payment. A severance package, if you will. Then you disappear. You leave this house tonight. You initiate divorce proceedings on grounds of your own adultery. I will provide some plausible evidence to that effect to avoid the fraud becoming public. You will never contact me again. You will never speak of me or our marriage to anyone. If you do, the confession goes straight to the authorities." It was a brutal, elegant trap. He was offering me freedom, but a freedom stripped of everything: the money, my dignity, my very story. I would have to vanish, a ghost discredited by my own manufactured scandal. "And if I refuse," I whispered, a last, futile defiance. "Then we default to option 1, he said simply. "I have already spoken to my solicitor and a discreet contact at the City of London Police. The choice is yours, but it is not a prolonged one. You have until morning." He left me then, alone in the study with the weight of my consequences. I sat in the silence of the room he ruled, surrounded by the symbols of the wealth I'd coveted and failed to truly grasp. I thought of the villa in Sicily, the new identity. They had been a mirage. The reality was this: a cold man in a cold room, offering me a way out that felt like a deeper prison. But it was the only way out. I found the documents on his desk. The confession was a masterpiece of legal clarity, damning me utterly. The postnuptial agreement was equally comprehensive. The lump sum mentioned was £100,000, enough to start over, but not enough to ever truly be free of want. A constant reminder of my failure and his calculated mercy. My hand shook as I picked up the heavy silver pen from his desk set. I thought of prison, of gray uniforms and lost years. I thought of the terrifying, empty freedom that awaited me outside. There was no winning move here, only a choice of defeats. I signed. The scratch of the pen on the thick vellum was the loudest sound in the world. I signed away my past 3 years, my ill-gotten gains, my future, my name. I packed a single suitcase with only my own clothes, things I'd bought before him. I didn't take a single piece of jewelry he'd given me. At dawn, a black car was waiting at the curb. Not his usual chauffeur. A man I didn't know stood beside it. "Mrs. Finch," he said, nodding. He opened the rear door. I took one last look at the imposing facade of the townhouse, my gilded cage now forever locked behind me. I had wanted access to his world, to his money. I had gotten it, and it had consumed me whole. I got into the car. It pulled away from the curb, smooth and silent. I didn't look back. I never loved him. I only ever wanted what he had, and in the end, he made sure I was left with exactly what I'd brought to him, nothing but myself and the bitter, hollow knowledge of the price of my own greed. The car merged into the early morning London traffic, taking me away from the life I'd tried to steal and into a consequence I had finally earned. I never loved him. I saw a vault, and I became a thief. He saw the theft, and he became the judge. Now, in this quiet room at a roadside hotel miles from London, with a new, cheap phone and the weight of a false future ahead of me, I understand the transaction is complete. He has his money back, his reputation intact, his life undisturbed. And I have my consequence. It is the only thing that is truly, unquestionably mine.